Information shared on the following program is for general information purposes only. It does not constitute legal, tax, investment, or other advice, nor is it intended to recommend any particular investments, products, or financial instruments. Always seek advice from your financial advisor, attorney, or accountant with regard to investment, legal, or tax questions.
I feel like I've forgotten something. Something important.
Did you remember to take the trash out to the curb?
Yeah, I did.
Then why is the can still in the backyard? Take out the trash.
I still don't think that's what it is.
Well, what else could it be?
Did you pick up little Anthony from school today?
No, you were supposed to.
Oh, that's it. Okay, I'll be right back.
Welcome to the only show in the country dedicated to helping savers worry less about money, the Worry-Free Retirement, with your host, best-selling author and fiduciary, Tony Walker.
The date, August 20th, 1983. A very, very special day in my life, and on that would prove to be charting a different course for the rest of my life. It was a very hot August day in Bowling Green, Kentucky, when I, at the age of 23, of clear and sound mind, correctly used my noggin to make the best decision of my life, and that was to marry my high school sweetheart, Susan. I remember the day well and how special it all turned out, yet on this special day in 1983, I also remember something else that is still, to this day, an image I cannot shake, and it's the picture taken of me and my father right before the wedding ceremony. A picture posed to the average person seems quite normal. A healthy, good-looking father in his mid-50s proudly shaking hands with his loving son, pumped up about a life-changing ceremony that would follow in just a few minutes. Yet, as normal looking as this picture appears to be, things with my father in 1983 were anything but normal. In fact, my father at the time of this picture, while in good physical health, was showing signs of mentally slipping. That's because it was about this time in his life that myself and others close to my father noticed a gradual decline in his mental state through his behavior towards us, and also noticed by his co-workers in his inability to keep facts, figures, and names straight as he tried to run a local mental health center there in Bowling Green, Kentucky. So at the ripe young age of 55, my father was definitely slipping, and the slipping got worse. In fact, it got so bad that in just a few years, he would be forced to leave his job and eventually, several years after that, pass away bedridden in a quaint little nursing home just outside of Bowling Green. To say that his slipping and eventually death was sad would be an understatement. So what is a son or any family member to do when a loved one begins to slip, especially when it comes to their finances? Well, let's find out. Welcome, folks, to the Worry-Free Retirement. And yes, I am that little man in the sweater vest, retirement planning specialist and fiduciary, Tony Walker. And today we're going to address one of the most difficult topics I've ever covered on this show, and that is, what should one do to deal with the fact that a loved one is slipping, especially when it comes to trying to manage their finances and the eventual tough decisions that will surely come their way. Well, before we get into today's topic, I do want to introduce the producer of our show, America's favorite financial sidekick, Mr. Aaron Orender, along with Louisville's most laid-back graphics artist, Mr. Derek Hudson, and one more person who is certainly not slipping, my favorite son-in-law, fellow fiduciary here in the Louisville office, Mr. Trey Jurgens. Okay, we got everybody here. Before we get started and we start talking about loved ones and their financial affairs and what happens when someone slips, I'm going to go around the room for you three guys and ask you. So, Aaron, let's start with you. Anybody in your family, immediate family, loved ones, that you know has slipped before or is currently slipping, as we say?
Yeah, I do currently have a close relative who's slipping per se. Don't want to get into the details of it or anything, but yes, I am currently experiencing that.
And what would you say is the one thing as a family, as you watch this loved one slip, that you all have to practice? I think we talked about this before the show.
You know, the first word that comes to my mind is just patience. You just have to be patient with them. You know, it's not like, I mean, someone said it to me one time, they're like, it's not like they're doing this on purpose. They're not doing it on purpose. So just be patient with them. It's almost like with a child, you know. Sometimes children mess up and they don't really mean to do it. Sometimes they do mean to do it, but sometimes they don't, and you just have to be patient with them.
Yeah, very good. Okay, and Derek, I know we were talking about this topic before the show. Tell us a little bit about your mother and the type of occupation she has.
Yeah, she works with a center called Easter Seals. It's an adult facility that it's for adults with mental disabilities usually. So they can be any age. It's not necessarily an elderly thing. But they go in 5 days a week and they can do activities like they'll take them swimming or they'll just hang out together and, you know, do things together. So it's she's been doing that for a few years now.
So it's really an adult daycare. It's almost like when you take youngsters to a child care, this is kind of the same setup, I guess.
Pretty much. You almost don't want to call it that, but that's kind of what it's a chance for them to socialize and to get out and do things.
Oh, that's interesting. And my favorite son-in-law, Trey, first of all, good morning, and thanks for being on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And this is an interesting topic for me, as you know. It's very personal to me, and we're going to get into, in the next few segments, what you're witnessing as you work here at Tony Walker Financial. But have you had anybody in your family, immediate family, especially, I guess, the cognitive issues we're talking about that you've witnessed go through this?
Not as much cognitive with my own family, but over the last 5 years, I've certainly seen it with clients, and meeting with more and more clients as they age, you start to see cognitive impairments, and it's something that unfortunately we have to deal with.
Yeah, and in fact, I think you were talking about the other day, of course, folks in our Louisville office, we have a lot of people come through our Louisville office, and Trey does a great job of taking the clients, and if I'm not available, you see a lot of folks. But what did the gentleman say the other day? I think he used the word senior moment.
Yeah, before you ever want to admit any actual cognitive issues, I think everybody is guilty of having a senior moment here and there. He had quite a few of them, but especially when it involves numbers or complex investment things that they're trying to explain, you've got to, as Aaron said, be patient, let them understand how they want to describe it to you so you don't just jump in and start assuming things.
Okay, folks, so here's what we're going to do. When we come back, I'm going to share with you the secret to getting your affairs in order, listen closely, before you slip, as well as possibly if you're an adult child watching this and you've got a family member you're concerned about, what to do about that parent that tends to be slipping. Some very, very important information coming your way. You stay tuned. You're watching the Worry-Free Retirement. I'm Tony Walker. I'll be right back. Have you recently retired, been laid off, or offered a pension buyout? Has the company you work for moved, been acquired, or closed its doors forever? And finally, do you have a 401k with a previous employer you'd like to move to safer territory? Then take advantage of this opportunity to move your 401k or lump sum pension to Tony Walker Financial. Let's meet in person to discuss your retirement options. Log on now to TonyWalkerFinancial.com to schedule your free, no obligation appointment. Let us help you today. Welcome back to the Worry-Free Retirement, with our subject today being, what are you supposed to do when someone you love starts slipping? Well, the first thing you must do is acknowledge that if we live long enough, one of two things is going to happen, possibly both. First, we're all going to eventually die. And if you'd like to watch last week's episode on what happens when someone dies, we actually did an episode called What Happens When Somebody Dies. Aaron, if you're handy over there, tell the nice folks watching the show how they can go back and watch last week's episode.
Sure, no problem. Folks, all you got to do is go to youtube.com. That's youtube.com. And right there in the search bar, just type in Tony Walker Financial. There it is right there. You see it. Just click on that and you're going to find all types of video content.
Okay, great. Thank you, Aaron. And secondly, okay, if you live long enough, there's a good possibility that before you die, I know this gets depressing, folks, but it's the reality, either physically or mentally, you and I are going to start slipping, especially when it comes to the mental side of life, or what the medical world likes to refer to as cognitive ability to deal with the real world. So why is this? Are people really having more cognitive issues than, say, our grandparents in the past? Well, in the studio, back again, is my favorite son-in-law and fellow fiduciary, Trey Juergens, and according to research you've done, yes, they are. Kind of tell us a little bit about what's going on in the world of the research and this whole issue of people aging and living longer.
Yeah, the big thing is life expectancy is going up. So as people are living longer, the chances that cognitive impairment comes into life is going to be higher and higher chance. So with our clients, and understanding that retirement could last 20, 30, even 40 years, as we meet with clients throughout the rest of their life, we're running into that more and more.
And you've had, I guess, I wouldn't say the privilege, that's kind of probably the wrong word, but now that you've been with Tony Walker Financial for 5 years, being a young man, you're meeting more and more of our clients. So a lot of times I'm meeting prospective clients as they come on board and you get to see them more. Share with us the experience of the last 5 years in seeing so many people. What do you think? Half of our clients are at least over 65, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and what you've seen with this whole cognitive issue.
It's one of the hardest things to deal with, because death, of course, is inevitable, but cognitive impairment is something that you don't study while you're studying for financial classes. It's something that you as a human just have to relate to, and seeing how our plans come together, seeing how important it is to involve the spouse, adult children, and get everything kind of under one roof so we can help guide the family, not only the individual that might be slipping. It just really brings the importance of meeting regularly, having someone that is kind of steering the ship, and allowing us to help as advisors.
That's a really good point. I know in the last segment you mentioned about those senior moments. Derek, I think we're ready here. This is kind of an interesting thing. This is 10 signs that a loved one is slipping. So let's go through these one by one. The first one, Trey, this was an article. Is this according to?
This is through the CDC and the Alzheimer's Association.
Okay, so this is pretty reputable stuff. So I like this first one. Memory loss that disrupts daily life. Did the article give an example of that?
Yeah, it's really when everybody's going to have a senior moment. Our clients have them, and
I think I've got
my
them more and
parents
more,
have them.
yeah.
Yeah, everybody's guilty of that. But when something starts becoming a problem daily, and it's mixing up numbers, mixing up names, mixing up things that you typically get right, that's just kind of one of the things. There's plenty more to go from, but that's the first.
Yeah, the second, challenges in planning or solving problems.
Yeah, something you might typically do on a day-to-day, whether it's kind of lining up your daily schedule, putting some dates on the calendar, and all of a sudden you're not really as sharp at doing that as you once were. That's number two.
Yeah, things in the past that seem simple. That makes sense. Number three, difficult in completing familiar tasks. We had a young lady come in. I know she's starting to slip. I think the driving issues around Louisville. She said she was having trouble remembering where. You remember that?
Young lady, she was driving along her typical path around Hurstbourne and Shelbyville. If anything was outside of there, she wasn't even ready to try to get there.
Interesting. Number four, confusion with time or place. Well, I saw my dad go through this. I mean, a lot of times he really just, you could tell, didn't know where he was, or the dates and all that got mixed up. We see that a lot. Mm-hmm. Number five, trouble understanding visual images and spatial relations. Did this have a lot to do with balance and things?
It does. So kind of your distance, depth perception, balance does start going as cognitive impairment enters your mind.
That's another thing, folks. I would say that too. I remember my dad started getting, like walking up steps and stuff. Be very careful if you have parents that are showing a lot of signs of dementia, because I mean, that's one of the problems. They could trip and fall. I mean, you just got to really make it safe for them. New problems with words, speaking, and writing. Oh, I know you said we've noticed this because a lot of our clients, sometimes it's the male, have been very outgoing and talkative, and all of a sudden maybe we haven't seen them in a year or two, and they come in. Why do you think that male, especially the male, but why do you think they're all of a sudden pretty quiet?
Yeah, this is one that's tough, because typically they're the one that'll point out things and kind of explain it to you, and then all of a sudden when they're afraid to make a mistake or afraid to show that they might be slipping, they just kind of close up.
Clam up,
yeah.
Don't they? It's interesting. Misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace steps. I got to tell you a quick story here. Years ago, when my organization only had about 3 employees, I wanted to get somebody in to help us get organized. So I called this lady who apparently was this organizational specialist. She shows up at the office, walks around for about 10 minutes, takes notes, and she said, I'll get back to you in about a week and give you a quote on what it'll take to get you organized. I said, this sounds awesome. So when she left, the building we were in, I couldn't really see around the corner. It had a doorbell that would ring when you'd enter and exit. So she left, and a few minutes later, I heard the doorbell go off again, and I said, hey, and then it went off again. I said, what in the world? So I stuck my head out there, nobody's there. I said, Connie, what is going on out here? And she goes, oh, that's the organizational specialist. And I said, well, what did she want? I said, well, she forgot her keys in here and she can't find them. All right, decreased or poor judgment. Any examples of this to look out for?
Unfortunately, we run into it quite often. The senior population is always the target for scams.
Ooh,
whether
yeah.
it's the unemployment scam, somebody calling you telling you you've won the lottery, or a distant relative passed away across seas and they've got money for you. They are feasting on the ability that they might reach somebody in a weak moment.
That is scary. Number 9, withdrawal from work or social activities. I guess that's understandable because if they know they're slipping, they don't want to maybe embarrass themselves. Or
yeah, they remove themselves from a familiar situation that people might notice pretty quickly.
And then finally, changes in mood or personality. So I guess all these things, folks, are just things you need to be on the lookout for and keep an eye on. Now, when we come back, we've only got a few minutes left. I'm going to share some interesting statistics and then show you a new service we're offering, something I've done for years, but is really going to help you get things organized if you're that parent that feels like you're slipping, or if you're an adult child and you're getting concerned about a parent slipping. Really good stuff coming your way. You're watching the Worry-Free Retirement Tray, and I'll be right back. Who can you trust? It's one of the most important decisions you'll have to make. Question is, are you ready? Well, we're here to help at Tony Walker Financial. You know, we care more about you than we do your money, and we have over 2,000 happy clients and an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau to prove it. Rolling over a 401k, confused about Social Security, maybe you're afraid of running out of money. Learn how to use and enjoy and protect your hard-earned money. Log on now to TonyWalkerFinancial.com and let's get started. Well, our Tony in the Trenches, this is a doozy. Tony, I've watched your shows that featured retirement reports for consumers to download. As you mentioned, it appears that most of these free reports do not advocate annuities. Well, you're exactly right. In fact, I hold one in my hot little hands, another one, about why these companies, these investors, never recommend annuities. In the essence of time, I've decided to do this. Next week, I'm going to do an entire show on annuities and why the investment world hates these products so much, but why savers should love them. So you're going to have to watch next week's show for that. Some good stuff, and I'll talk about this report then. Okay, here we are. I'm in the studio with my favorite son-in-law, Trey, talking about a very difficult topic. Trey, of all the statistics you researched about what's going on now with this aging population, what was the one you found most interesting?
Well, it's kind of a two-part. The first part being that by the year 2034,
we've got it here, okay,
which coincides with some news about Social Security that came out a couple weeks ago, that might be when that goes belly up.
So 2034 is, okay.
2034 is the year that adults age 65 plus will surpass children under 18.
That's a scary thought.
Yes.
So back in the day when I was young and people were having 5, 6, 7 kids, many people aren't having children or 1 or 2 children, but in the meantime, we got this aging population, so it's a huge issue, isn't it?
Exactly.
In fact, Derek, throw up a few statistics about what's going on in the nursing homes. This was an interesting one, Trey. Tell us what this one is explaining here.
Yeah, so in 1977, there were about 1.3 million folks in long-term care nursing homes. And since then, it's expanded to over 8 million people. This is home health care. This is professional guidance. One statistic that's baffling is that $267 billion is estimated that's being cared by family members in unpaid
Unpaid,
workers.
yeah.
So that's posing a problem, and that's the healthcare side, not the financial side. So the financial burden that family members are left to deal with is something that's really scary.
And the key to this, folks, is planning. So years ago, Aaron, you might remember this when I used to do all my little workshops over at the Courtyard Marriott. Remember that room down the hall where we did those?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You may not have known this, but we had to clear out that room one night because I had an elderly lady. She had 4 children, Trey, with the spouses that wanted to meet with me, and I didn't have that much room. So we met there, and it was the most productive meeting I think I've ever had. Since then, Trey, I've had even more members of families bring their parents in, and we've had these discussions. So tell the viewing audience a new free service we can offer right now.
Yeah, what we've been doing are these family strategy sessions where online you can go to our Let's Get Started. We've got a folder with the Last Day Planner. It's a really good document. Our starter kit, of course. If you go to the website and scroll down to Let's Get Started, or right next to that starter kit, you can download this family strategy kit. And we'll mail it out to you and give you a chance to kind of get some documents together and schedule some time for us to help you.
That's awesome, Trey. This is going to be really cool. We welcome the opportunity to help you and your family. So folks, I know this has been a heavy topic. We got to get into the Bible and see what God shares, because God shares some information, some good news on this topic that's really going to help you. So if you're struggling, either yourself or you're an adult child struggling with this, got some good stuff coming your way about the Bible, I definitely need a cup of coffee on this. I'll be right back. It is estimated that each day over 10,000 people will turn 65, which means a lot of advisors selling a lot of annuities. Don't get stuck in the wrong annuity. Get a second opinion from TonyWalkerFinancial.com. Several years ago, a client of mine called to tell me that after only a few years into their retirement, her husband was really starting to slip. In fact, following that phone call, she was forced to place her husband of more than 40 years into the care of a local nursing home at a monthly cost of over $12,000. After a few months of living through a gut-wrenching experience of watching her husband retire only to soon find himself literally out of his mind, she had this comment: "Tony, you know those golden years they all talk about?" To which I replied, "Yes." She said with a despondent voice, "Well, they aren't so golden after all." You see, folks, as we have discussed, assuming you're watching this show and can still fog a mirror, there's one of two things that will happen to all of us. The first one, we are eventually all going to die. And second, for most of us, prior to our deaths, we are going to start slipping, whether that's mentally or physically. This is why I wrote the book, Live Well, Die Broke. You see, here's what I've learned, not only in my own life watching loved ones slip away, but also in meeting with over 15,000 savers and watching many of my clients age and slip away as well, that the golden years in retirement may not be so golden after all. And in the end, our eventual fate of slipping away is a done deal. No matter how healthy we think we are now, no matter how much we eat well and exercise, eventually, assuming we live long enough, we're going to start slipping. So knowing that the golden years may not be so golden, where can we turn for encouragement to deal with this eventual fate that will befall us all? Well, how are we supposed to know what to do as we get older and before we really begin to slip? Well, let's just see what God has to say about that as we turn to Genesis chapter 23, verse 1, where Abraham's wife, Sarah, has just slipped away for good. Oh, by the way, you think today's life expectancy of 80 years of age or so is high? Sarah was 127 when she finally passed. But look at what Abraham does shortly after Sarah passes. In verse 2, he mourns her passing. Then in verse 3, he gets up and takes care of the task at hand. That's right, he has to find a proper burial site for Sarah. And then notice in verse 20 that the people of the land where Abraham happened to be and where he wished to bury Sarah, they decided to deed over to Abraham the burial plot. In other words, Abraham trusted God would provide a proper place to bury his wife. Well, then what does Abraham do? Well, you go to the next chapter 24, verse 1, where the Bible reminds us that Abraham was no spring chicken either and realized he had to make plans before he slipped away. We see that he goes to the oldest and informs him of the next steps in dealing with his final request. Now, at this point, you might be saying, Tony, this isn't helping me deal with my own feelings of loneliness or what's going to happen to me when I slip away, nor is it helping in dealing with my fears and concerns of my parents who are slipping away. In fact, the more I deal with their slipping mentally, you might be saying to yourself, is the more aggravated and frustrated I become. So what in the world is the message, Tony? Well, there's two messages. First, and most importantly, it's the same message Moses gave adult children, and ironically, it's the one Jesus reminds us of in Mark 7:10, where he says, honor your father and your mother. But since this is a difficult task indeed, we are to look for help and honor them through what we have to do, and that's what they're putting us through, maybe the HE double hockey sticks, if you know what I mean. So there you are struggling and fearful of what to do next for loved ones. So what do? Well, God's Word helps us there as we slip down to Genesis 24, verse 12, where the servant, that's me and you, as we're taking care of people, asks God the following: O Lord, the God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show loving kindness to my master Abraham. Kind of reminds us of Proverbs 16:20, which simply says, whoever gives heed to instruction prospers, and blessed is he who trusts in the Lord. You see the theme here, folks. This is not about you and me and how we can get our own strength to deal with all these difficulties, but about those whom we love and how we can honor others by taking care of them with God's help and God's strength. And finally, and most importantly, the ultimate promise of God for those of us who are trying to take care of all these people who are slipping away is found at the very end of Matthew, literally the last thing Jesus says in verse 20, and that's this: I am with you always, even to the end of the age. And that, my friend, is a promise you can take to the bank. Amen? So Tony, you might be saying, that sounds good, Tony, but I need to make plans now before it's too late, either for myself or my loved ones. So what is my next step? Well, assuming you still have all your marbles, the first step is to get a plan in place and to communicate that plan to someone such as myself who can help you do that. You see, folks, for more than 37 years and after meeting with more than 15,000 savers, many of whom are over the age of 65, and yes, in meeting on multiple occasions with both adult children and one or more of their parents, I can tell you this: the key to dealing with the inevitable is you have to get your thoughts in writing, and sooner rather than later. To not do so is just simply to live in denial and eventually put away the things that you know are going to happen. So how do we get started? How does this conversation take place? Well, that's where we're here to help at Tony Walker Financial. So if that's you, if you feel like you personally are slipping a little bit and need to get your affairs in order, or if you're those adult children who want to help your parents get their affairs in order, let me invite you to order this brand new free conversation starter kit that's available to families so we can meet and talk about what's going on to set up a plan. So what you're going to do is go to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. If you want this free kit, you click on Starter Kit, and then there's a button you can click to get us to mail you this. Now again, if you don't have access to the internet, there's a toll-free number right now on the screen. Just call and say, I want the free starter kit that deals with communications for me and my family, and I would like to follow up with a phone call for Tony. Now, if it warrants, here's what I'll personally do. I will meet with you and any family member you wish for me to meet with in a group setting so that we can discuss your plans for the future and get things in order before it's too late. Well, folks, I hope you've enjoyed today's program. We've covered a lot of information, and next week we've got a great show coming up because with the plethora and multitude of people selling annuities now, I'm seeing a lot of scary things happening out there. So what are the pros and cons of annuities, and what do you need to know before you purchase the wrong annuity and possibly get stuck in that thing forever? I'm Tony Walker. Good stuff coming your way next week, but between now and then, you remember, if all else fails, you be worry-free. Make it a good one.